Hey, Stephen Yanni here doing the Junkyard Crawl at Bernardston Auto Wrecking in Bernardston, Massachusetts with a 1964 Plymouth Barracuda. It all started right here. Let's remember that Barracuda went 10 model years, 64 through 74, a decade of legends really in the making. But let's remember too that Barracuda was launched something like 2 weeks before Ford Mustang. It's true. These came out April 1st, 1964. Meanwhile, Ford launched the Mustang April 17th, 1964. So like 16 days before Mustang, Barracuda was launched. Does this make it the first pony car? No. You got to remember that Ford was playing with Mustang type vehicles. The Mustang 1 mid-engine car in 62, the Mustang 2 pre-production prototype show car in 63, and of course the actual Mustang in 64 and a half for the 65 model year. So Plymouth was fully aware that Ford was going to pull a stunt wherein we're going to do a personal sporty car, and he says, you know what, let's do our little Valiant over as a fun car for young people. Thus the Barracuda was born. Now these were popular cars. A total of 23,443 of these were built in 1964, the first year, and they could be had with the V8 or one of two slant sixes. More on that in a second. Now the price on this was $2,365 in stripped condition, and that was actually $444 more than a basic Valiant V100 two-door sedan. So to get the fastback body and the stylish nose of the Barracuda, you paid $444 more than the base Valiant, and under the skin they're kind of the same car. But with that said, this one here is pretty special in a few ways. This one was born a V8. We know that because the front fenders have ghosts. Oh, here's the actual V8 emblem right here. Now, 64 was the very first year for the 273, the LA, the light A series engine made specifically for A-body applications like this Barracuda. Now, you paid an extra $131 for the 273 V8 over the 170 slant 6, and of course between them was the 225 slant 6. But something seen only on V8 Barracudas was this. This is a cable actuated throttle, and this would go to the 2-barrel carburetor right there, push and pull as you go. Slant 6 cars had a metal rod here that would actuate a bell crank. So V8 cars only had this cable, which arrived on all A bodies, I think in 1967 or thereabouts, or 66. But again, you know it's a V8 car and you got this. Also the K-frame on a slant 6 car, the driver's side is a much taller cage right here. So this is a V8 A-body K-frame, kind of a rare piece right there. This one here, the original light blue, corporate blue if you will, is still present. The trim tag is long gone. We're in Massachusetts, folks. Look at that. It's gone, 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 crumbled. So that's a sign of the times and where we're located. But again, this would have been a spiffy little car, 180 horsepower out of that 2-barrel 273. 65 would bring the 4-barrel formula engine with 273, and but again, 64 was the 2-barrel only 273, but plenty of power. The one thing that's kind of weird is that in 64, the V8 cars and the 6-owner cars both got these puny 9-inch drum brakes right here. The 10-inch drums would arrive in 65, but again, the small bolt pattern 9-inch drum was seen on V8s and 6-cylinder cars in 64, the big debut. But again, the V8 logo right there tells us this thing was as hot as it got in 64 for Barracuda. And more goodies inside of this one here. The Barracuda was so popular that even AMT came out. Now, it was a year later, 1965, AMT brought out this really cool 1/25th scale plastic model kit. Cool stuff. You can build it out as a dragster here. And it says here, new Dodge 426 Hemi head engine. Dodge in a Plymouth? Plymouth had Hemis too. You got to wonder who wrote that and why they got that wrong. But this kit could be built with either a slant 6 or a Hemi. But cool stuff here on the side of this box. Maybe you were built one of these when you were a kid. I was 1 year old when this thing came out in 65. But the Barracuda was as popular as Mustang with model builders. Proof positive right here. Now here's the original intake manifold right here. This is the 2-barrel 273 piece right here. A little 2-barrel Carter or Stromberg would live right there. The 4-barrel again came along in 1965 with 235 horsepower Carter AFB. But something cool about all 273s up till 68 is this. These are the rocker arms right here. The 273 had solid lifters. These are adjustable rockers right here. And these things, believe it or not, can be transferred onto a 340 or a 360, which came with hydraulic lifters and non-adjustable stamped steel rockers. So if you have a 273 kicking around, except for the 69, 9s, which had hydraulics. You can take these rocker arms here and the adjustable feature, put a solid cam, your 340 or 360, and have more RPM capability. So all 273s have solid lifters and adjustable rocker arms. Now, one thing seen here in 64 only, the final year and first year, if you will, is the push button torque flight. This thing right here. Here's the buttons here that would control the 904 torque flight, reverse, neutral, drive 2, 1, the dial-in torque flight. These push buttons here, they control a cable that feeds into the valve body to affect gear changes. And again, these buttons here were big with drag racers, but this is the dial-in torque flight automatic. Now this one here, originally blue with a black gut. Huge interior, and again, Car Life magazine liked the Barracuda so much that they even featured it on their cover right here, July 64. In fact, I was born the year and month this thing came out, but there it is on the cover. Barracuda road tests and technical review of Valiant's Fastback V8. And inside they tell us the whole story here, and it says, to say the Plymouth Valiant Barracuda is an attention getter is an understatement. A more accurate commentary is that it is a traffic stopping, people grabbing, where do I sign the order bank sort of attention getter. And, you know, they talk about here, it's not very secret that the Barracuda is the Chrysler Corporation's immediate answer to the sales threat imposed by the Ford Mustang. And it's pretty safe to assume that these are two of what must be developed, or must develop as a whole separate breed of automobile, the sports luxury market runabout. Yeah, the pony car is what we call that now. And of course, pony being a reference to the Mustang, which was the sales leader with 600,000 sales versus 23,443 for the little Barracuda. They tried, but here's the back story here, the big rear window. And a cool little road test of one of the very first Barracudas. And here's more pictures right here. And that's a 273 two-barrel car. We can see the engine's got air conditioning, I believe, on that one. And just a really versatile little car. And they're talking here, the brakes, they're saying here on the right, we'd also like to see some bigger and better brakes, since these registered a maximum deceleration rate of only 20 feet per second on the first stop from 80 miles per hour. So again, the little 9-inch drums weren't so good. 10-inchers came along in 65. But one thing we got to remember is that the Ford Mustang, when it debuted in 64 and a half, April 17th, 64, was only offered as a convertible or a sedan with a notch roof. The 2+2 Fastback didn't arrive till halfway through 1965. Which is to say that the Barracuda was the first fastback on the market right from the go. In fact, Barracuda wasn't available as anything other than this fastback. Now, the crazy thing about Barracuda is while Mustang had a steel back and a small-ish rear window, Barracuda stylists made the window glass part of the style of the car. This massive curved backlight, which gives the car its fastback style. And here's the trunk panel right here, this chrome band here. And the interesting thing, 1964 only is the only time that the term Valiant appears on a Barracuda, right there. 65, Barracuda became its own creature, and Valiant only seen on 64s. You got to remember, the Plymouth Valiant was Plymouth's cheap economy car, the A-body, similar to the Dodge Dart. And so the bones of the Valiant became the Barracuda. Meanwhile, over at Ford, the Falcon underpinned every Mustang in the early generation. So, you know, a little bit of monkey see, monkey do. Now, the deck lid on this one here is pretty small, comes right off. And inside we can see that there's a fair amount of room. The only downside is this structure right here is totally in the way for getting stuff in. And this glass does not lift. It's not a hatchback like it would have been if it was made in the late 70s or the 80s. But I'm a big drag race fan, and I built this model here of a 1965 Barracuda match racer. And like any self-respecting Mopar match racer, a race Hemi under the hood. And there were a fair number of Barracuda-based funny cars back in the day. Maybe the most notorious, frankly, is Richard Petty's 43 Junior. And here's a little Racing Champions 1/43rd scale replica of that car. And this came out in 1999. Hard to imagine this is 24 years old now. But the story of Richard Petty's 43 Junior is kind of tragic. And here's the story of it here in the February of 66 Car Life magazine. And inside it's a little story about the Pettys, their racing dynasty, and Richard Petty, outlaw King Kong and tragic death marred a promising racing career. The story is here. They say that here when Chrysler Chrysler introduced its King Kong Hemi head engine in '64, it dominated the NASCAR season. When NASCAR outlawed the King Kong Hemi, Chrysler withdrew its Plymouth. So Petty decided to build a little match race Barracuda. Here's the thing, he says here, and this is again is 1966, I'm a little disgusted, Richard admitted. Here I am, 27 years old, and I'm sitting around as good as I'll ever be, and I'll stay this way 3 or 4 years at the least, and I'm wasting time. This again is because Bill France said, hey, Chrysler, no more Hemis until you make those for everyone. So for '65, Chrysler sat it out. So Petty says, I won near 100 grand last year, '64, and I think I could be winning close to the same this year. So he says at the top right, I'm giving drag racing exhibitions and I'm making a lot of money for it. But if I was making more money, I'd still want to get back to racing because I'm not a drag racer, I'm a race car driver. Petty was not big on drag racing, but he says, besides, the only thing I really hated in racing was killing that boy. Now he's talking about that at Dallas, Georgia. In April of '65, it says here a small drag strip in Dallas, Georgia. Last April, a tie rod on his car broke, the '43 Junior Hemi Barracuda match racer. A wheel hurled off and the car into the crowd. The car swerved into a ditch alongside the track, careened up an embankment, then became airborne, arced over a wire fence, and crashed into a knot of spectators. An 8-year-old boy was killed, and 7 or 8 other people were injured. Now, at this point in time, Chrysler and the Pettys were targeted with a $1.5 million damage suit brought by various persons, and Petty says here in '66, I don't know what's going to happen, he admitted. I feel strongly that we were not to blame, but the courts will decide that. So yeah, it was kind of a dark chapter in Petty's racing career. And as it turned out, as he told me in a 2010 interview I did with him on Speed Channel, that's me and the King right there. A very fun, and I'll never forget that day. But he did say that what eventually happened was the families were compensated by Chrysler Corporation for the damages and the loss, the death. The original car was balled up, thrown away. Kind of looks like this thing here. In fact, I'll include a picture of that car. Ryan Brutt, the automotive archaeologist, actually publicized that car. They dug it out of a hole, it's messed up. But Petty did build another car, built a replacement, and he continued to drag race. That's the '43 Junior seen with Hillborn injectors, not the carbureted car. So Petty continued racing after the tragedy. And here's the crazy thing. The guy in the other lane at that Dallas, Georgia drag strip was none other than Arnie the Farmer Beswick, who was running his 421 GTO against Petty's Hemi Barracuda. And he was there, he survived. Clearly, Beswick made a good pass, but Petty crashed, and the rest is history. But that's the story of 1964, the very first year for Plymouth Barracuda, the first of a 10 model year run. And they don't call them pony cars because of the Barracuda's success, but with that said, the Barracuda actually beat Mustang to the market by 16 full days. Do the math, it's true. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the Steve Mag's YouTube channel, share this video with your friends, give it a thumbs up, like, thingamajig, and hit the bell so you're aware of the next video, which is tomorrow morning.